does he? Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. I will call the meeting to order. We are in our first section of our meeting, which will go into executive session. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. I'll read the communications when we go back into executive open session after our executive session, which will be approximately 1 hour. So do I have a motion to go into executive session for the purposes to discuss collective bargaining for the nurses and personnel contracts pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, and to discuss litigation strategy pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 3.
So moved.
Second.
Maria, may we have a roll call vote?
Mayor Verga,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
and Ms. Prince.
Yes.
So we will leave and we will target being back 7 o'clock on the dot with him. Are we still
Greg, you
Zoom?
need to leave the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think so.
Yeah, I heard there was plans with them yesterday about the courtroom, and I heard it was beautiful.
Yeah, better.
Yeah.
I saw you from afar at the topping off, so yes, congratulations. And good to see you in person. I haven't seen you in person for most of this.
It's.
I'll see you tomorrow too.
I was just going to recognize the ROTC program.
Thank you. Caroline. Thank you. Yeah.
We have their mics and everything on.
Yeah. Good.
Good evening, everyone. Today is April 13th, 2022. This is a meeting of the Gloucester School Committee. I will call this meeting to order. Consistent with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. The public may not physically attend this meeting, but every effort will be made to allow the public to view and listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. I will mention that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. And I ask you all to stand firmly and salute. Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we are doing recognitions after the public hearing. According to this. Yes, okay, so the first item of business is the public hearing on the fiscal year 2023 proposed school budget. We will have a presentation by the superintendent, and then if there are any attendees in the public that want to comment on our budget process, that would be the time to provide your input. So we'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Great. This is the presentation. Give me one moment. Okay, see that? Great. So, good evening, everybody. So, our annual public hearing on budget development. This is a public hearing for the FY 2023 budget, which goes from July 1, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. Hard to believe that we're in the year 2023. Doesn't make sense, but here we go. So just a few things, then we'll get into the dollars here. I just want to remind folks the guiding principles for FY 23 budget development. So that's connected to the development of the Gloucester Public Schools plan for ongoing improvement. I gave you an update on the development of that plan and the teams that are working on it. Our last meeting, that's connected to our priorities for student learning, student support, and high quality instruction. Continue to want to be moderate and in terms of our investments and act with financial prudence, especially because just the ongoing uncertainty around COVID and the pandemic. While things seem to be getting better, we have experienced that before. So not be a naysayer here, but just want to be cautious and prudent. We'll talk about salary adjustments we've made through our contract negotiations to improve recruitment and retention of staff. Those increases are including our budget, and then also building the budget with an eye towards FY25 when the significant level of federal relief that we've been benefiting from ends. So we have to be prudent as we go forward. We talked quite a bit about the collaborative budget process that really began in November and December with our budget managers, school leaders, department heads, that sort of stuff. And then also just want to highlight or remind folks of the, I'd say impressive, but also very informative and helpful presentations that really kicked off the public part of this process back in January, so a number of months ago, where our school leaders and our department heads came and discussed about their strengths and priorities, what they need to execute on those priorities, and what they're going to be doing in the upcoming year. And obviously, we want always to make sure that the budget is aligned with that work, with their strengths, with their priorities, and the work they're doing. This is the budget calendar, and so you can see we've accomplished all the things that are in yellow. I just highlighted those presentations in blue there from January, and we're at the school committee public hearing. Still a few more steps to go after this. The school committee ultimately has to vote on any revision in the budget coming after, as the process continues through this public hearing, and then submits that to the approved budget when it's approved later in April to the mayor and then the city council, like they do with all departments in the city, would then incorporate that into the city's entire budget. Skip over that. So let's get into the finances. So first, wanted to start with the overview. You'll see the FY22 budget was at this current year at $45.6 million for our operating budget. We're recommending to the committee, and this hasn't changed the process, a 46.9 or essentially $47 million budget. That's a proposed increase of $1.35 million over last year. That's a 2.96% increase across the whole budget, which will show you is in alignment and consistent with increases over the past 6 or 7 years. Just in terms of, again, the broad overview right now, the primary expense categories for us are really salaries, ordinary expenses, and benefits. You can see the percentages here. Like most organizations, particularly schools, the vast majority of our expenses are in our people. They're our most valuable resource. And so you can see 73% of our expenditures are in salaries, benefits are 15%, and ordinary expenses are 12%. If you look at the salary breakdowns, in professional salaries, those are teachers and directors, and also our clinical staff, psychologists, social workers, adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, and then we have pairs and new supervisors, education support professionals and new supervisors, about 9%, and then you can see a few other categories with smaller parts of that pie there. And then our ordinary expenses, remember, our ordinary expenses account for 12% of the budget. If you break that down, that 12%, you get 40% of that 12% is special education costs, which we'll show you more details about in a moment. And then you see transportation. We talk about that, particularly special education transportation being a significant amount of the budget. And then other ones are smaller. Supplies is the next largest expense category. Health insurance, just to break that down, because we don't have a pie chart on it, but you can see that this year we anticipate the budget will be, we're budgeting $6.8 million. That's an increase of almost $400,000 from last year, a larger increase than last year, but historically on the lower end of increases. You see in FY20, FY21, we had upwards 7% and 8%. Doing a little bit better since then, but this is always a bit of a wild card in our budget. But our best numbers right now, and we're confident, are this 5.8% number, which, as I said, is in alignment with last year, but less percentage-wise than a couple of years ago. This is just what you shared before, which is just sort of documenting the ways we adjusted salaries this year through our contract negotiations. This is for professional staff, so our teachers and the like. Really wanted to increase our starting wages to attract more early career teachers to our schools, and also try to benefit our veteran teachers by shortening the number of years to get to the top salary. Another, make some adjustments from year to year, or contract to contract, I should say, trying to, in order to stay comparable with neighboring districts. One area we did that this year was in increasing the athletic coaches' pay and athletic coaching stipends. And similar increases in operations and support staff, again, trying to increase the starting salaries, especially increasing wages significantly for some of our lower wage earners, non-professional staff. The committee has done a very, very strong job of doing that this year across numerous roles, including transportation and food service. Some real changes there, very positive. And that's just a summary here of our teacher compensation changes across the board, almost $1 million in increases, and that's for all of our teaching staff and all the professional staff. As we've described numerous times, ESSER, the federal relief funds, have given us an opportunity to support students and support our schools in a variety of ways, everything from additional cleaning and ventilation this year and air filtering to staff, especially in the areas of mental health support, social emotional support, behavioral support, and also in terms of academic support as well. You see here, we're in terms of adding new positions to the operating budget, we are expecting to add 4 positions that have been funded by ESSER this year. This is a way of, over time, getting as many of these positions onto the operating budget as possible. For this year, for the FY23, I'm sorry, we're adding 4 positions that were paid by for ESSER this year. Folks that have come to you and have explained to you some of the real advantages and successes they're having. For district mental health coordinator, special education administrator, Family adjustment counselor, and the transportation manager. The first 3 are really about supporting our most vulnerable students and supporting our staff to do just that. And our transportation manager, was a new position this year, allows us to improve coordination, safety of our transportation operations. Those 4 positions are the new positions in the budget at this point. To summarize there. Added tuition, another major driver of our budget. You can see that our average replacements have been consistent over the years, just varying a few up and down each year. We anticipate 53 pupils will have to be served outside the district. These are students with significant needs that the district doesn't have the capacity or programs to support their needs as determined through the evaluation process. And then you see that between our out-of-district special education costs have different pieces to them. There's a tuition costs, which you see there. There's state aid we get to offset those costs. And there's also contingency each year that the school committee allows for, we budget for, because these tuitions can change after approval of the budget. We can also have students move in or out of district placements as well. So because of the significant additional expense of having 1 or 2 students change placement, the districts I've worked in have always allowed for special education tuition contingency in terms of just smart fiscal budgeting, and you have done that, and you are recommending continuing at the level of $5,000 for the special education tuition contingency. So this is a summary of the significant adjustment to the budget I've just gone over. So the salary increases on the first two rows, the ESSER positions moving into the operating budget, our benefits increases, and then adjustment in terms of ESSER of shifting some math curriculum materials onto ESSER off the operating budget. That's why you see that negative $130,000. This slide hasn't changed. I'm showing this to you through all the various presentations we've given over the last few months. And then this is just a summary again, which I showed you at the very beginning in terms of the big picture. This is again by department. We're going to show you this in two ways. So the by department, the growth over from FY22 to FY23, as I've described before, you'll see a couple places where there's significant increases or decreases above the sort of 2.96% average. Transportation is one of those that is out of district transportation costs, which continue to rise. You see a decrease, significant professional development. That's simply a reallocation off of the operating budget to ESSER, as I just described, at $130,000. And then athletics, as I also said earlier, we increased the athletic stipends in a significant way. So percentage-wise, it's not a very large increase. Dollar-wise, all told, the percentage increase is higher than other areas. And then the bottom line is just the summary again of the change from FY22 to FY23, the total difference in the percentage difference. I just want to show this to you in a slightly different way, which is before benefits. The upshot of this slide is that looking at the increase in the operating budget without benefits, the increase is 2.5%, from $38.8 million to $39.8 million, all told. When you add benefits, that's when the increase gets to 2.96%. Okay, so a total of the $1.35 million increase in operating budget, nearly $400,000 of that is benefits alone. Just want to point out that it isn't just expenses in terms of the work we do, it's also the benefits are taking a big chunk of that, more than about a quarter of that. And then we always want to put our expenditures in the context of the larger community and larger statewide. And you can see this is both a combination of our DART districts and our local districts. We continue to remain in the middle of this group, and also very close to state average, which I think, as I've always said, is I think the right place to be in terms of being fiscally sound, being so very supportive. The community and city are very supportive of our schools, and that's evidenced here, and also balancing that with financial prudence as well. And then just a last slide here to put the increases in the context of the last few years, or last 6 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 years. You can see that different years have their different financial situations, but we're able at this point to be consistent within a percentage, tenth of a percentage point across the last 4 years, the ones marked in yellow in terms of increases, so we like to be reasonable, like to be in line with the recent past in terms of our increase in our budget. So that, and then the last piece is just in terms of, this is the public hearing notice that was shared, you approved a few weeks ago, and that was in the paper in terms of publicizing this hearing. I will stop there and
so we now open up for the public hearing. Because this is the budget the public is making comments on, or they have anything to say. So I will open up the public hearing portion of this part of the meeting regarding just the fiscal year 2023 budget. We will have oral communications on general matters after this topic is closed. So if there's anybody who is in attendance that does want to speak, you can raise your hand. You will be called on to speak. I do not see anybody raising their hand. So
Somebody just
Hand one up.
you go. Oh, CK. You may speak. Maria, we have her.
Yeah.
Unmuted.
She should be able
Still
to.
muted.
She has to unmute.
You,
Ask her to unmute.
CK, do you want, you need to unmute? You've been unmuted. You need to state your name and address for the record.
They took their hand out. I wonder if it's-
Something must be going on because I just lost connection to.
You're still on though.
Yeah, but I lost connection from it.
Are we? Shall we, I don't know how to,
Give them
Get
an
us-
opportunity, give them an opportunity to disconnect and reconnect again.
if you'd still like to speak, do you want to try disconnecting and reconnecting to the meeting? And we'll keep an eye out for you to come back and unmute you again. Okay. Just give it a minute. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment? You can raise your hand. I'll give them a call. She comes- the person comes back. Well, This
We're gonna
is,
keep the public hearing open for her to come back.
yeah. For anybody who may not want to raise their hand tonight, but may want to send us comments, they can send it to us at Gloucester School Committee at gloucesterschools.com. We definitely take public comments on the budget that way as well. Okay. Okay, all right, if the person who wanted to speak comes back, we can certainly take the comments during our oral communications as well, on any budget. Okay, so I see no more hands raised, but thank you, people, for being in attendance to listen to the budget presentation so that everybody understands what the priorities are in terms of learning and how it relates to the budget process. So I will close the public hearing. And that, so from the process from here, as you saw, is so usually we would take the input and go back to BNF and see how that incorporates or informs any decisions that might be different. So if we get comments or communications to that effect, that'll certainly be incorporated into the budget we then discuss, and the next step would be sending the budget to the mayor's office. And I know it's on the schedule for next meeting, April 27th, but I was just wondering from Mayor Virgo, when, is there a deadline? Is there a date you would like the budget by? Does that?
No, so we would presumably vote at it at our next meeting. Would there be time to get it to BNF and back?
No, so, well, yes, if we have, if that's your timeline, but if we could do it the first meeting in May, would that work for you? Or should we just try to make sure we get the BNF to meet and get it done by the 27th?
I would say if you can get it to me early May, that'd be really good. If it's going to get to the council, because they're going to go through it, their BNF, and well, you know the procedure, you've been through it. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because we could always do a BNF meeting prior to the April 27th school committee meeting.
Yes, it's school vacation next week. Just keep that in mind.
That's what I'm saying. We could do it that Wednesday before, 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that is the end of our budget public hearing. Okay. The next item, so now we will continue with our regular meeting agenda items. First order of business on that is oral communications. If there's anybody that would like to speak on any topic, you may raise your hand and we will recognize you to speak. Okay, we have a quiet audience tonight. Okay, the next item of business is recognitions. So there's all sorts of great things going on in the district this time of year. It's a busy time. There's certainly things to
I
recognize.
start with one about something that was unearthed at the Beaman School.
Sure.
I'll hold this up. This is a journal, an entry of all the PTA meetings that are happening across the city. I believe if I have the year right, so in the 1921-1922 school year. I'll hold a couple pictures here, a couple pages rather. This is from the Riggs School and I think the Maplewood School, which may have also been known as the Ward 6. So apparently at that time, a person with very good handwriting, which I think people can see here, would attend each of the PTA meetings at each of the schools, would take some very clear and well-written notes. And then oftentimes they would show up in the article in the newspaper shortly thereafter about that meeting. And so this was uncovered at Beaman School. Not quite sure how it got there or why it got there, but discovered about a month ago. And so I'm not sure this is one. I'm not sure what we should do with it. Perhaps the Historical Society or the Historical Library. But if there are any local historians out there who can guide us on how to take care of this properly, it certainly is a tremendous artifact of what was happening in our schools and with our families, really 100 years ago.
2 years after a pandemic, right?
And 2 years after. That's
Exactly.
right.
Oh,
Where we
wow.
are right now, which is
Right.
really incredible.
Yeah. So
Can you
just
give us a clue?
Last beach day.
a remarkable find by folks at Beaman, so which makes me very nervous every time I touch it. So somebody else will take care of it. So I've got a few more, but if other folks have other recognitions, I can wait.
Okay,
Well, as well as many of my colleagues, want to give a shout out to Footloose, which was the amazing Gloucester High School musical extravaganza. I don't know if others want to say, but it was really a tremendous effort by so many students, staff, and Officer Scola. And I'll let others speak, but it was really quite something. Congratulations.
Yeah, I would just second that. It was an incredible performance. And I think what was even better is that the students just seemed to have a blast. They just seemed so happy and just excited to be back up on stage. And it was just an honor to go see.
yeah, definitely a lot of talent in that show. It was certainly a highlight. I wish high school kids in mass could all see it too. It would be nice if there's a forum at the high school, like kind of mentioned this, that if some of the kids could do a few songs even to show, just to show their peers kind of what they're into and how talented they are. Yeah, that's a good night. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to recognize the junior ROTC program who finished second in regional drill and second in the regional qualifier. Outstanding program. I had the opportunity to see him practicing and drilling here in the field house, and as a former service member who served in various color guards, I know how much work goes into that type of stuff. Really should be commended for the work that they do.
Building on the junior ROTC accomplishments, want to recognize two of the cadets who have received significant ROT scholarships. So first is Commanding Officer Zyla Dort. She won the Marine Corps and Army scholarships.
Zayla.
So, Zayla,
Zayla.
sorry, I met Zayla a number of times.
That's all right.
And I still can't get her name right, sorry, Zayla. So Commanding Officer Zayla Dort, won both the Marine Corps and the Army's scholarships. She chose the Marine Corps scholarship, which is impressive to have that ability. And she will be attending Penn State University and majoring in English. And then another one was second cadet, just get Jacob's right name, Jacob Andrews, that he won the Army's 3-year ROT scholarship. And he's been accepted into Embry-Riddle. Will be attending Embry-Riddle starting in the fall. He's also, that's a 3-year scholarship, but then also ROTC will be covering an additional scholarship for 1 year. So both of them have full 4-year scholarships to the college they're attending, Penn State University and Embry-Riddle. So just congratulations to Zayla and Jacob for their hard work over multiple years, which has resulted in just tremendous accomplishment for both.
And I've known Jacob since he was a baby, and he was Buzz Lightyear for Halloween. So he's he's studying aeronautical engineering. So this is definitely a dream for him. He's worked very hard towards.
I hope his friends are not listening to that and didn't hear that. The point being, of course, that it's been interesting flying for a long time.
Exactly. Exactly. Any-
And then-
I-
I just want to recognize all those that were involved in bringing Kevin Hines here for his tremendous story that he shared with parents and students in the school. It was extremely moving, and I was very impressed and happy to see that the public schools are bringing that type of real life issues to the attention of kids, because it was very relatable in many ways. And it just kudos to the many that got him here, because I know he's world renowned and not easy to schedule. So it was extremely impressive.
Great partnership between our AD-CAM and our clinical staff, and also the Department of Public Health. Really contribute both, and others help that. And then I've got one more, which is I want to acknowledge one of our athletes, Caroline McKay, is a swimmer, quite accomplished swimmer. This year she was the fastest in the 50-meter freestyle in the NEC conference. She was first in the conference meet, second in the North Sectional meet, and then fifth in the state meet. In the 50-meter free, if you know anything about swimming, that means she swims very quickly. It's the fastest race out there, and she's obviously very speedy and very accomplished. She's committed to Assumption University in the fall, where she's going to swim there. Congratulations to Caroline on a fantastic season.
Yeah, we should probably go back to that. Due to technical difficulties, we'll go back to comments on the fiscal year 2023 budget. CK, you seem to have returned and your hand is up, and Maria can unmute you if you could state your name and address for the record.
Hi. Is that working? Hello?
I can hear you, CK.
Oh, thanks. Hi, this is Catherine Ryan, and my address is 17 High Rock. Thank you. I have a couple questions about the budget. I've been following it through the different iterations. A couple questions and a couple comments. I appreciate the slideshow and the presentation. I was wondering if there is a way to phrase it. I noticed when Gary did the presentation earlier, and when Ben did his job-related budget discussion last fall, it starts out with talking about the biggest hit is teacher salaries and benefits. And I'm just wondering if there's a different way that we can phrase that because I think it sets up a problem with blaming teachers for the budget overall. And then that leads me into the next, actually, this specific, hang on one second. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with going between the computer and my phone. I appreciate your patience with this. Okay, so the specific quote was, you know, for fiscal year 2022, update a small number of categories. Salaries is the significant part of the budget. The bulk of our expenditures are salaries and benefits. It's sort of said over and over and over and over again. And when I go to look at the entire school budget, even as far back as 2020, you know, the overall school budget for the city is what at that time was 118 about. And 52% of the city's budget was really approximated as the total funds going towards school expenditures. And they're just not reflected in this budget ever. You know, it's the differences that aren't included. You know, you have the choice out now, you didn't then, but the choice out, the ESSEC Tech, the rental of buildings, any school facility rental, the DPW portion, which is significant, Talbot Rank, you know, any city services. And then also this huge budget related to expenditures and studies and consultants for whether it's the new attendance thing or the school building project or curriculum. They're just not reflected in the total budget. And I'm just hoping that there's a way that you can, and in the past, the pie part of your budget packet has shown that a little bit more clearly. And I personally would rather have the salaries of the teachers go up more and that we have the most competitive salaries. We also talked about making sure there was budget item related to equity and more diverse hiring. And I'm not seeing that called out. We also talked about with the ESSER funds, you know, having that broken down exactly where it went to, you know, possibly also related to more salaries. And when we looked at the budgets for the teachers negotiating in the fall this year, you know, the amount that they wanted for the percentage of living difference, when you added it up for the entire budget for the request they were asking, fell between 750,000 to 1.2 million, which is less than some annual add-on, you know, consultancy fees or purchase that you make. So I just want to really argue that you need to reframe this thing away from the teachers and the salaries and their benefits. And that I think is our great strength. So the other thing that I learned last fall with the teacher negotiations, you know, they cap out at 16 years. So some of our best senior faculty have been, once they hit 16 years, they don't continue to get raises. And to me, that is just mind-blowing. So I'm hoping that the budget can actually reflect the entire budget that's, you know, put in from related to the school and the city. Be more mindful of the teachers so they're not blamed and it's not unions and salaries. And that we really see this portion of equity brought up more strongly, which I don't see here. So I think those are my main points for right now.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay. All right, so back to the agenda. We do not have any students from the student council because of the timing of our meeting tonight. Oh, she's an advisor. Oh.
For Christine, from DECA, talking about the DECA field trip, just on the consent agenda.
Oh, for the field trip, yes. Okay, so now we have the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items on the consent agenda they would like to remove? I assume we're removing the DECA, so we can talk about it. Yes? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the DECA field trip, which is scheduled for Friday, April 22nd to Wednesday, April 27th, 2022, to Atlanta, Georgia.
Hi, Christine, can you share with us about the DECA field trip, and also, which is the result of some accomplishments? If you could also share the accomplishments too, it'd be very helpful.
Sure, absolutely. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christine Simmons, and yes, I'm the DECA advisor. I teach one business class and also computer science at the high school. So this year, it's been really a transition year for me, but it's gone really well. So after 2 years, of course, the same thing with COVID, we were able to compete not only in fall leadership conference, we had a state career development conference in Boston. That was March 10th to the 12th. We brought 17 students, and we had Eliana Faria. Hopefully she'll be on this soon. She placed second for financial consulting event. Kiara O'Connor, she placed first in hospitality and tourism event. Sean Bergen, third place, professional selling. And then we had a couple of contenders in the top 10, which were business law and ethics. That was Cameron McDonald and Dakota De Oliveira. So we did really, really well. And so we're pleased to announce that Eliana Faria, Kiara, and Eliana both qualified for ICDC, which is the International Career Development Conference in Atlanta, Georgia this year. Kiara has decided not to go because of family obligations, but Eliana is here online, so this is great. So I will chaperone Eliana next Friday, hopefully if you guys approve it, to Atlanta so that she can compete. There'll be 18,000 high school students from across the country. It's actually considered international competition at this point because we have Mexico. I think we had Germany and Italy last year, or whatever, 2019. So it's considered like an international competition. So very, very excited. We're ready to go. Hopefully Eliana is here. She can probably explain a little bit about her presentation, if you don't mind.
Sure. Go ahead.
So this is a good experience right here, Eliana.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share a little bit about what I've been doing with DECA, but thank you everybody for your time just to start off. And I've been competing in the financial consulting category for 3 years, and this is going to be my 3rd time going to internationals, and hopefully due to COVID, it's been virtual. So hopefully I'll actually get to be in person if you guys approve of this trip. So for my presentation, I assume the role of a financial consultant, and this year's prompt, I'm essentially telling my client based off of their criteria and how it fits into the 4 C's of capacity, credit, cash, and collateral, whether or not they qualify for a mortgage, and if so, how much they can take on. So that is the bulk of my presentation that I'll be displaying at internationals.
Excellent. Wow. Very nice. You can come back and do it for the community.
Yeah, excuse me. Last year, virtually, you uploaded your program on YouTube. What did you placed, right?
Yeah, I made it to top 18 internationally.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Does anybody have any questions about the field trip, or was the application pretty straightforward? There's supervision. Hopefully you're not on an airline that is going to give you trouble about your travel plans.
I'll go with Delta Airlines.
Excellent. Okay. All right, so we'll
Move to approve the consent agenda.
second. Right, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Verda, He may have left early.
Oh, he said he had to be here.
Okay.
Ms. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Mason?
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy?
Yes.
Mr. Melvin?
Yes.
Mr. Minio?
Yes.
Ms. Prince?
Yes. Consent agenda is approved.
Congratulations, Eliana.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Good luck. Good luck.
It's gonna be great.
Best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it a lot. It means a lot.
All righty then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
I hope I printed out the wrong agenda. Because our, the next item of business would be the building project update. We have many people from the project team. We're glad you could come in person. I think we haven't met in person.
Ever?
Little groups. So it's nice to have everybody here. We have Brian Ramatka, who is the project manager for CBRE Hearing. He's keeping a lot of things straight and everybody else in line. And we have Brad Dorr and Michelle Rogers from Dorr and Whittier. We have Alex Corbett and Tom from WT Rich, our contractors, and Jonathan Pope, who is here out of retirement to come as the chair of the building project team, the school building committee. Okay, so who is presenting?
I will control the slides, but Brian is here to present. Just get it set up here.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for the introduction. As Kathy said, I'm Brian Ramatka with CBRE. We're the owner's project management team on behalf of the city and the school district for the new East Gloucester Veterans Memorial School. And we're happy to provide an update to the school committee tonight on the projects. So Kathy went through some of the introductions. I'll mention a few other people that aren't here tonight. And then I'll give you a quick overview of the project, both the history and the current status. And then I'll turn it over to our architect to walk us through this beautiful new building that's coming up. Finally, our construction manager will give us an update on what's been happening out on the site. And then we'll open it up to any questions. But if anything is unclear during the presentation, feel free to raise your hand. And we'll make sure to address it. So it's clear about the information presented. Okay, so here we have our project team. So along with myself, some other people are not here tonight. Mark Leiden, Dennis Pacitti, and Yash Parmar. I work with all of them on this project. Dennis is our on-site representative who's over there on Webster Street day in, day out, overseeing the construction work and also working with the community. Yash handles a lot of administrative functions, and Mark is our senior advisor who's been doing a lot of MSBA projects over the years. Dorr and Whittier, we have Brad Dorr and Michelle Rogers with us here tonight. Their faces will probably be familiar. They've been on this project for quite a few years now. Bryce Taft is not here tonight. He's also very involved on a daily basis, both during design and the construction. And from WT Rich, we have Tom Hood, our senior project manager, and Alex Corbett. Alex was on a project for the city a few years back, the West Paris School, so he might be familiar to some of you. And there are a lot of members on their team. John Rich, the CEO, is also personally very involved in the project, and he's a resident here in Gloucester, so that's pretty special. And then we have two other members from WT Rich that are residents of Gloucester. One of them even graduated from the East Gloucester Elementary School, I think back in 2010. So that's been pretty exciting, to go from that old school to now being part of this new construction project. So also the Massachusetts School Building Authority, of course, plays a big part in this project. They're not here tonight, but they show up with the checkbook to fund the project for millions and millions of dollars. So we're very grateful for their efforts. And of course, everyone here tonight at the school committee and also within the city that have been promoting this project. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here to help you make this new school a success. So this has been quite an effort in the making. I think we're on year 5 now of this project, starting back in 2017 with the development and planning stages. After that, the MSBA invited this project into the study phase. That happened in 2019. did initial schematic design, and then it went before the citizens for a vote in December of 2020. And after that approval came in, we moved forward with design. Our architects worked fairly diligently to develop the design, the contract documents, specifications that we can go out to bid. And that moved us then to the construction phase, which we actually started a little bit earlier. If you look at that graph, you'll see that the tan line, the blue lines that kind of intersect. So we were able to start some of the construction activities before we actually fully completed the design. And that helps us to get kids into the school in the fall of 2024.
23.
Oh, 23, sorry.
Difference there.
Yes. So now we're a good ways into the construction work. We had our initial site work beginning in August, moved into the foundations in the fall, then steel starting at the beginning of the year, and the rest of the phases that are coming after that. Our construction manager will talk a little bit more in detail later. And we're currently tracking on schedule. So that's really been a huge effort. We have some very difficult conditions in the construction industry right now that we've been tackling. So to keep things on track has been quite the challenge for the team. So here's a little financial information. To date, we have just over $60 million in contracts that have been awarded. The majority of that has gone to the construction manager, who then subcontracts out for the additional work to the trades, for all the labor and material to get the job built. We have just over $2 million left to be awarded to those subcontracts. So we're in the process of doing that now over the next few weeks, but we're about 96% complete the procurement. And some of those other items are just items that come in at the very end of the job, with landscaping, playground, and some window treatments. We have $215,000 right now in potential change orders on the job. A big chunk of that was $131,000 for some classroom benches. So I mentioned that, we have a very difficult climate, and we've had to go through a series of value engineering exercises on this project in order to be able to meet the budget. But the very positive news is that we have been able to move forward with that. And once we started to bring together these contracts and we negotiated the GMP, we found that we were in a positive financial situation that we could bring these classroom benches back. So that was really a huge success, because those are very nice aspects in the classroom to provide alternative methods for the kids to engage with other children and with the teachers. So that was a big success. And the other items are a combination of some of the value engineering items, as well as some site conditions, which you typically run into on construction projects. In our case here, we uncovered a lot of boulders in this area, which is maybe not that surprising, but you really can't calculate that up front. So those are some of the items, and we have contingencies set apart to cover these costs. Currently, we have $0 in change orders. So on the financial end, things are going very well. Here's a little closer look into some of the project finances. So on the upper left-hand side, you'll see our overall project budget. The dark green ring represents contracts that have been allocated within the budget. And then the yellow parts are the contingency funds that we have in place. A bit of that has been extended, but we still have some healthy contingencies to see us through the project. We're currently billing about 20% of the contracts. And on the right, you will see a graph with that says MBE and WBE. So that stands for Minority Business Enterprises and Women's Business Enterprises. So we have goals established for both the designer and the contractor on this project to incorporate a certain percentage of minority and women businesses in the subcontracts that they let out. The contractor issues it to various trade contractors, and for the designer, that has to do with their engineering team that provides support on the project. So as you can see, the dark bar is higher than the light green bar. So that's great, because we have exceeded our goals across the board. On the bottom, you have some updates on some of the billing. So you'll notice the light green that shows the billing to date. So for the designer, they have billed for a lot of their work, of course, because big part of that is the design work. Whereas the CM, the construction manager, they're just getting ramped up. They're billing at 13% today. So I also wanted to share with you some of the activities. Some of you may be familiar with construction projects. I know we have some veterans here on the school committee that have done a number of these, but other people are new. So throughout the different phases of a project, the roles will vary, but this kind of shows you some of the activities that each of us are doing during the construction phase. So as your owner's project manager, we oversee the overall workflow and responsibilities in the project. We participate in owner meetings, presentations such as tonight. We publish reports on the project. We review and negotiate the contracts with the architect, with the construction manager. We're reviewing schedules for conformance. We're monitoring the project every day out there on the site to make sure that the city is getting a quality building. We also interact with the community on behalf of the city and also manage the overall costs of the job, handling the contingency funds, reviewing change orders and the like. Our architect is very busy right now with a lot of paperwork, handling a lot of submittals and shop drawings. And this is a really critical part in the project, especially with this climate that we have, because lead times on a lot of materials are very long, and they have been burning the midnight oil to get these things reviewed, get them out there, so that the trade contractors can place the orders for materials, they can be delivered to site, and we can get the job completed on time. But they also do a number of other things. They participate in the weekly coordination meetings. They come out on a regular basis to the site to inspect the work, to make sure that the building is being constructed in conformance with the designs and specifications, and also participate in the review of the contractor's submissions for payment. Our construction manager is doing the bulk of the work right now. We have all kinds of people on the site that they're coordinating and managing. They also take care of the construction safety. They put together the schedules for the contractors. Right now, they're also finishing up the final procurement items to get the additional subcontracts let out. So as a team, we all have different roles, but it's very important that we work together, because we will not be successful if we don't. And I'm happy to report that everyone has been working together very successfully on this project. And as a result, we have a project that is on time and on budget. We're about 20% complete with the construction. We have foundations in, and the steel is well underway, almost complete in both building A and B. So as I mentioned, as your OPM, we're also involved with the community outreach. So we have a number of different methods that we use to communicate what's happening with the project. So in the beginning, we had a kickoff meeting within the community to give them a heads up on what to expect as the overall construction flows through. But we also provide weekly updates when there's anything of substance that's happening that would affect the community. We distribute flyers to neighbors. We send out email notifications to those people who have signed up. And of course, we also publish the information on the school project site. So if anyone has questions about what's happening in the school, that's a great resource. All kinds of information available there. And of course, the school building committee meetings are also public meetings, so they can sit in on that to find out how things are going. So in summary, like I said, the project is on schedule and on budget, so that's wonderful news. Steel is well underway. We're busy with the submittals, as I said, but we do have some real challenges with the construction industry that we continue to deal with. These have been going on since COVID hit. Essentially, when COVID was going around the world, all these manufacturing places were shut down. And so there's a shortage of materials, there's shortages of labor, and that has led to drastic increases in construction pricing for materials, and also very long lead times. So I did just want to share just briefly some of these things that we're dealing with in terms of that. So here's a little diagram that shows some of the cost increases. Like you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, PVC pipe and fitting, 3% increase in the last 8 weeks. So when we put together budgets on projects and we do escalation, for the coming years, we might look at 3 to 4% increase for a whole year. So here we're seeing that kind of increase in just 8 weeks. Rebar went up 55% from last year. Lumber and plywood 80% in 1 year. And steel topping the list at over 105% increase. So those are huge things. When we put together the budget for this project, of course, we had no idea that COVID was going to hit and that we would be dealing with these things. So the fact that we can move forward with this school project at all, let alone have a project that is within the budget and on schedule, is absolutely fantastic. And it should serve the city very well for many years to come. We also have the same thing with lead times. These are just a few examples. Wood doors and frames, over 14 weeks, and roofing insulation, 40+ weeks. So that means, you want to build something, okay, you got to place, the design's finished, you place the order, now you're supposed to wait almost a year before you get the materials. So we've been fortunate, the designers and the construction managers have been working very hard to help us find strategic ways to work through these challenges. And also all the subcontractors that are on board. We've had conversations with them from the very beginning, explaining that we're in this tight position and it's basically all hands on deck, that we need to work together to make this a success. So that's the update on the overview on the project. Now I'd like to turn it over to,
Just a couple of questions, Brian. When you say a trade contractor, is that kind of an in-between between you and the people that are doing the supply on the supply side, or what exactly is a trade?
Yes, so the construction manager has the overall contract for the job, and they let out subcontracts to various trades. That might be a roofer, it might be a mason, steel erector, and so forth. And then those parties are the ones that will procure the materials and the labor to execute the work.
The other question I had was, when you're putting together a proposal, is anything, is pricing on anything kind of pre-negotiated, or is it negotiated up front? The steel per se, let's say, when you started the project, did you lock in a price at, for the what's needed for the building?
So generally, yes, and there are two different ways that these subcontracts are let out. We have trade bids, and with those particular contracts, everyone submits a bid, and the lowest qualified trade bidder is given the work. With other non-trade bids, and that's a slightly different term, these are still subcontractors. But with those particular items, those can be negotiated. So the general contractor, or the construction manager, is out interviewing different companies that provide these services and then negotiating with them to get the best pricing.
Last question. I'm a manufacturer's rep. I represent a big electromechanical contract manufacturer. I represent a foundry. Some of the places in New England require that certain sourcing goes either locally or regionally. Is that the case in a project? Is this project just too big for something like that? I mean, let's say the landscaping, for instance, is that something that you would say, well, let's source that locally? Is that?
So we do every effort we can to source local products, but ultimately, as we are managing these public funds, one of the driving things is the total dollar value. So that's usually what's driving it.
Thank you.
Just quick questions, the contingency funds, do you know offhand what percentage of the budget?
So we had roughly.
I know there's a couple of
Yeah,
them,
so we had
right?
roughly 4% for contingencies,
Okay,
and we still have about 3% of that remaining.
okay, we're 20% into the job. And change orders, those usually aren't reimbursable, is that most time from MSBA
Yes,
perspective?
generally it depends. The MSBA will go through every single cost item and evaluate at the very end of the job what gets reimbursed and what doesn't. So it depends on the nature of what the change order is.
And I guess my question, and you need a crystal ball for this, I guess, is just to wonder if the MSBA is going to be a little bit more flexible, knowing the industry is extremely difficult.
No, not really. And, I've had this conversation with them, explaining this position that we're in
Yeah.
and seeing if they'll work with it. But I think their basic position is that they provide funding to all the schools, and they're interested in doing as many new school renovation projects as possible. So they try to spread that money out, and that's kind of what it is.
But to keep that on time, on budget, which is the best words through this whole project, and knowing that we're having these challenges in the industry, I'm just hoping that if it comes a point where we're really challenged, which that could happen, I just ordered windows for my house and I won't see them till the fall. I'm hoping that they'll be flexible if a change order is needed because of
I
time.
mean, they'll make
Not
those
because we want it,
evaluations,
but
yeah,
because
they'll,
we need it.
they'll make those evaluations at the end. So if we were to incur some cost increases that were associated with that,
They'll figure it out.
that's something that they can consider. But I can't really speak for them as to what the final ruling will be. I do know that generally, they're not very fond of those approvals. Again, that their motivation is to help the districts build schools and to do that as much as possible, spread out the wealth within the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Just curious, where the steel is sourced. Is it overseas or?
Yeah, our construction manager can talk about that. And we still have some more things. to go
The
through.
company's out of, they're out of Canada, part of the Buy American Act. So, Buy North American Act. And I haven't seen the lead criteria for where it's being sourced. Have you, Alex?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know it's being fabricated in Canada.
It's being fabricated in Canada, and I think they're sourcing it locally as well. Hopefully they're not getting it, but I guarantee you they're not getting it from China.
That's
We wouldn't get it done.
No.
Yeah, well,
Well, it's almost all on site.
yeah, I think there was like 20% for building heat and all that.
All
No,
the steel
it's
is
more
on
than
site.
that, yeah. Okay, moving on to Doran Whittier from Newbury.
This is the best part, right? So as you just heard, most of that steel is already on site. And for those of you who were actually at the raising of that final beam, not quite the final beam, but the signed beam, that was such an exciting day. And so the bones are there now, and you can begin to understand what the building's going to look like. So hopefully now, as we go through some of these images, you're going to be able to see, oh yeah, that's what that looks like, and that's that part of the building. So starting with the site here, I don't have the cursor. I don't know if anybody has a cursor, but just to orientate you, along the bottom is Washington Street, and to the right is your parking area. In the back is where we're going to have the larger playground. That will be for the older students, first through fifth grade, and towards the front will be for kindergarten and first graders in that playground area to the side of it, and we're going to be doing some playground markings for games within the bus loop area as well. And then you can see, you can begin to imagine now where the buses are going to be coming in. That's where the construction vehicles are actually entering the site. And on the lower part of the site, you can begin to picture where passenger cars will be coming in, and that's closer to where the lower trailer is, just above where the old parking lot was. So if we look at the building, now you can begin to picture what that building looks like. On the far side here, we have what's called the academic wing. If you hear the contractors referring to the A building, we're only building one building, but we refer to it as two separate pieces. The A building is the academic area, and the B building is more the public side. And that includes the media center and the admission portion of the building, which is there in the front. And then the larger portion of the building that you'll see is the cafeteria and the gymnasium on top. So go ahead and go forward here. Thank you. So now that you've seen it in sort of a three-dimensional, might help you understand the site plan here a little bit better. This is the view that you typically see when we're showing you plans. A little bit harder to understand, but you can see the parking area that comes around, the gates that protect the students at the back for the playground space, and the gate at the bus loop. Those are those two red markers on the site plan. So that will help protect students during school hours so that they can play safely within those areas there. And go ahead forward one. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the play spaces because they're very exciting to us. The older students are going to have a variety of play space areas. There'll be swing sets. There's a small area so students can gather sort of away from the commotion if they want some quiet time. There's the field in the middle. And then on the far side, you'll have climbing structures, slides, all sorts of different movement apparatus that we work very closely with the playground group to talk about what kind of play equipment would be best for bodybuilding for students, promoting confidence as they work through this play area, as well as promoting engaging and working with other students. So a lot of these play structures that you see, you can be working with other students in cooperative play. And that's a really great way to look at playgrounds. So that happens here on this back one, as well as other pieces like we have the Miracle Mile where students can actually walk a mile, Foursquare, and basketball. And then on the front, we actually have this lower playground, which again is age appropriate for these kindergarten and first grade students. So we have things like pull-up bars, slides, balancing areas where they can begin to build their own body confidence as they play out front. And then there's also some hopscotch and some sort of more age appropriate playground space, as well as Foursquare. Everybody loves Foursquare. So you can see that I circled on the play area where those are. Go forward now. And I just want to take you quickly around the building so that as you begin to think about seeing that building out there on the site, you begin to picture how this building is going to look. So this is the drive entrance as we're coming up Webster Street. We're going to be turning into the parking area. And the first portion of the building that you'll see is the gymnasium, with the 3 round windows and the taller windows. And underneath that is the cafeteria space. And then to the far side, you'll see the media center and library. And then beyond that is the academic area. Go ahead. A little bit closer up, as you're approaching and coming around the corner to park your vehicle or drop off your student, you'll get a closer view of the building itself. Go ahead. And then as you've come around the back, during the afternoon, we've expanded the pickup area so that we can help get traffic off of Webster Street. And so we've increased this area. So as you come around, you'd get a view of the back of the building. And a lot of people can't see this portion of the building just yet because we haven't allowed anybody around the back, but you can see that the materials are brick and the metal panels. And the glass area in the middle there, that is the extended learning area. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few moments when we talk about the inside of the building. Back around the front, we have the bus loop and playground space once again. And back to our front image, go ahead and click one more. This is the main entrance of the building. So students coming into the building will enter there as well as visitors throughout the day. And you can see on the right-hand side, there's the plan there, which is helping to orientate you to where the main entrance is. This will be a vestibule entrance. Students can come through during the morning hours, but after that part of time, you would be checking into the administration area, which is on the left-hand side. And as you work your way into the building, the cafeteria would be on your right. And then if you went all the way down the hallway towards the back, you would take a left and go into the academic area. Go ahead. And this is what that looks like. As you've entered the building, you're in the main lobby. On the right-hand side is the cafeteria. And straight in front of you is a set of stairs that will bring you up to the gymnasium and media center. And you can see if you were to continue down the hallway, it would bring you to the academic area. This is a view of the cafeteria as we've come in. One of the unique features of this cafeteria is there are some quiet dining spaces. So if you happen to be a student who wants to have a little bit of downtime during the day, or if you're a teacher who has some of the lunch bunch groups and you want to meet with some students and have that kind of interaction, there's 2 spaces within this cafeteria for smaller dining areas. The first floor plan, so most of the floor plans are pretty much alike. As we look at the academic area, you have classrooms on both sides of the corridor. Those are those blue spaces. And the pink spaces are designated for special education spaces. Go ahead. On the second floor, we have some unique spaces, which I'll talk about in just a few moments, which is the gymnasium, the media center, and the art and music spaces. And one more. And on the third floor, again, once again, you can see our academic area. What you might notice within this space is go forward one more, I'm sorry. Within these typical classroom academic areas is between each classroom block. You had seen that the blue spaces with the pink in the middle. These are small group rooms where teachers can bring a small group of students into that classroom for special group learning, or a group of students can move into that space and still be viewed by their teachers in the classroom, and they can work on special projects together in a smaller group environment. One more. Still have lots more to talk about in these special classrooms. These classrooms are also special because we have dividing walls between two classrooms. So you can open them up and you can have two classrooms having interaction and teaching between the two classrooms. That feature is a result of the way that Gloucester teaches students today. We have two schools that are coming together, and they have different teaching methodologies. So the flexibility within these classrooms will allow all of that flexibility in teaching methodologies to continue depending on how you want to organize both on day one when you open, and 10 years from now and 20 years from now, you'll have the opportunity to keep moving these classrooms around. Go ahead, one more. So this is a view of the corridors going down, that view that we just showed you. Each floor will have a different color. So as you move up through from the first grade to the second grade to the third, first floor, second floor, third floor, you'll have a different color scheme on each floor. Go ahead, one more. And as you look at these classrooms just a little bit closer, you'll see that every classroom has sinks. Student cubbies are within the classroom. So that corridor that we just saw, you're not going to have students gathering, taking out their books and hanging up their coats. All of that's going to be happening within the classroom. So a little bit more quieter environment as you're moving through the corridors. The folding wall that I just spoke about is a writable surface wall. So actually you can have students writing on those walls and sharing information. You have short throw projectors on your teaching wall, and the built-in seating that we're so happy to have back actually provides a place for students to separate themselves from larger groups, maybe gather, sit with one or two students on that bench, read a book, or just have some time to themselves, maybe to calm down and then rejoin their group. But they're always within that classroom. So always being supervised by one or two adults. Go ahead. Here's a view of that classroom. So in the back, you can see the built-in benches that are sort of separated, the writable surface on the right-hand side, the teachers at the teaching wall there, and closer towards us is the student cubbies and the tables. And the window that you see on the right-hand side that you're just getting off the view there, that's the view into that small group room. So if students go into that room, the teacher still has a view of what they're doing in that room. Go ahead. This is that extended learning area that I spoke about a little bit earlier. So there is one of these per floor, so it's shared between two grade levels on each floor. And this is an opportunity for teachers to take students out of their classroom environment, so you get a different experience within that classroom. And maybe you're working on a special project. Maybe it's robotics or Legos or something that is outside of your classroom, and you want to work with a bigger group. Maybe it's a whole grade group, maybe it's kids from different grade levels. And this is the place where that kind of learning can take place, and it's always on display. So other students walking past might see what you're doing, which is really great. And your work can stay here if you're working on something that's a building project or something of that sort. It doesn't have to always be disassembled because it's time to move on to the next module of your learning. Go ahead. So back to that second floor that I talked about, there's so many exciting things that are happening. We have the music room, which is the space on the top right behind the gymnasium, and the art room, which you can see on the lower photograph there. And the art room actually has a garage door that opens out into the media center. And one of the unique things about that is that you can interact, it's like you can interact with the media center. Maybe you're going to learn about artists of the day or have a different kind of project. And you can have that open up, and the flow between the library and the art room becomes synergetic once that door is open. Go ahead. In the gymnasium, we have the opportunity for not only full-scale basketball games, but we also have an auditorium. So we have a full stage within the gymnasium, which can double as an additional teaching space for either dance or some another program within the gym as well. And you can see how connected it is to the music area as well. And then one of my favorite spaces is the media center. This is just a very dynamic space. It has room for 2 classrooms to come in and gather within the space. It has areas for the tables and the areas here, so you can have small groups. You have areas over by in the corner there where you can see where students can take books and just sit in that area and look out into the hallway or curl up into their little seats and read their own books with 1 or 2 friends. And once we've left the media center, we're now at the top of the stairs heading back down towards the main lobby of the entrance area there.
Michelle.
I know, I just went out so fast. So do you have any questions?
Sam, I just sort of have one like nitpicky question. Is there a way in the art room to block that door so that students, if they don't want to interact, they're not distracted by each other? Like
you can close the door.
No, like a curtain, it's all glass.
It's all glass.
Yeah, I guess I'm just sort of wondering the reality of how distracting that will be if there's a group in the library and a group in the art room.
It's actually a good question, but it's not one of the concerns that we had heard about art on display and sort of interacting with all those
I don't know.
spaces.
I'm just, as I'm seeing it, I'm sort of curious about it. So
One of the things that I remembered from West Parish was somebody stating, always wanting to see how awesome our kids are.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those opportunities
Yeah.
to see the awesomeness of what's happening behind that door.
They're gonna be making faces at each other.
That's the reality. Maybe
That's
it's
what I'm
first, but after a
picturing.
while, they sort of stop noticing.
that's what I'm picturing.
Maybe, but if ultimately became a, significant concern, you could always put a motorized shade in there.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was just
Go up
wondering.
and down.
I think
So
the idea of the door is great, but if there was the opportunity to put something there to block it if necessary.
It could also be used to display some of the artwork, that you could see then from the library
Yeah.
through the glass as well.
So also, from the gymnasium and the music space, how is it soundproofed?
That's a very good question. So there's actually a storage space between the gymnasium and the music room. So that's part of our acoustical separation. And then we work very closely with the acoustician to help us make sure that we're not going to have that kind of noise transfer in between those 2 spaces.
I mean, I'm imagining the gym class, right, and music class.
Right.
Right.
And the music is just going to blare right into the gymnasium. No, so the doors are sealed. There's a set of doors. They're a little bit outside of the gym area. They're closer to the stage access. Those are acoustically sealed. And then again, that separation of the storage room that's actually going to buffer some of that noise.
Couple of quick things. One, 2 great PowerPoint presentations. I probably sat through 1,000 of them. Those are the 2 most informative I've heard in a couple of years anyway, so.
You know.
There you go.
Grace, I know, pressure
You
on
set
me,
that
right?
bar really
Yeah.
high for you. That's on.
Couple of things that stuck out to me. One was the young kids playground out in front of the school. Is that fenced in, or is that, it looked like it was just an open?
The entire site is fenced, and then there's a gate that prevents any vehicles from coming down that driveway during the day.
Thus, that was my concern.
Mhm.
If it was open, I'd be concerned. When we talk about new schools, I mean, like I was in the new school over at Manchester recently and, kind of had a little bit of a nautical theme to it. I mean, is there a general template when you're building new schools? Or do you just say, here's a clean sheet of paper, here's what we need to do? Or here's what the community would like, here's what we recommend. Give me a snapshot of what that might look like.
Sure. 5 years worth of work here. So what we do is we start with your educational program.
Yep.
So the building that you're seeing right now has been specifically designed to meet Gloucester's needs, Gloucester's special education needs, and Gloucester's teaching modules, methodologies. And then anything that comes back from us from the community. So originally in neither of the schools, you don't have art rooms. So that's became really important to us that you don't always have art on a part. One of your schools doesn't have those on the stage. So those kinds of spaces are very important and they get built into our program. We also are building our building around the site that we have. So it's very rare that you would see a gymnasium over a cafeteria, but because of our site, we had to stack those spaces in order to make the rest of the site work for you. Site is really important. Site circulation is very important for us, and we want to make sure that there's enough play space, enough spaces for cars and parents pick up and drop off.
And the gymnasium, is it a wood floor? Is it the kind of the new material?
Nope, wood floor.
It is, good. And is there bleachers in there? Or is it just kind of just chairs on this? I mean, how
So
much
we-
room on the sideline? I guess is
So
what I'm asking.
it's a very good question. So we do have room for some bleachers because we heard one of those comments after West Parish was there's no place for anybody to sit. So we actually made this space a little bit larger, and you have the ability to have, I think it's 3 rows of bleachers, and they sit right in front of the stage. So
And they're flexible, right?
And yes, and they fold up and they move into the storage room. So
I think one of the other challenges, right, that we face, you're talking about blank slate, how do you get it all going? We still also have to work within the state guidelines.
Right.
Because the state only allows you to have so much space for particular areas. So we really try and balance that off, because ultimately if we exceed that, then the state doesn't participate. So, there's a balance there, and we're always checking, going back and forth with, in the building committee environment, these working groups to make sure that we try and strike that balance.
they don't participate in the extra space.
Correct.
Right. Last question for me, is this presentation available to the public outside? If you didn't come to this thing tonight and you're in the public, is it going to be available? Is it currently available?
All of our, everything we do is always available because Zoom recordings.
Yeah.
We'll also have this on the website. The building product website is as well as the government website, but yeah, all of these recordings are always available.
Wonderful job, really impressive. Both presentations, appreciate it.
We're very excited about your school.
So now we'd like to move on to our final part to show you kind of what's been happening, and we've seen all the beautiful designs and now we can see it coming together. So I'm going to turn it over to WT Rich to walk us through what's happening out there on the site.
Yeah, I'll try to bring this home. I got a high bar. So we do have a really cool drone video that we do monthly that we'll share in a second, but we did kind of want to set the context in terms of us being visitors to your community. We obviously understand and are sympathetic to that. So we wanted to share kind of our construction layout, kind of showing and how it's dictating sort of the final design of the project that Michelle had showed earlier. So like I mentioned, we have a really good, we feel good about our site circulation on this project, making sure that we're providing as little disruption as possible within the community. So again, just a kind of a simple site plan that we use as our logistical plan to make sure we're providing our subcontractors with enough layout space, lay down space, storage space, obviously contractor parking to keep people off site, and just kind of showing how we're able to kind of queue up trucks as they enter. I'm sure you're aware of the steel deliveries that have shown up in concrete trucks as well. So Brian mentioned this earlier in his presentation, just kind of a more in-depth schedule view of where we're at to date. So obviously being in April, you can see sort of the predecessor activities that have occurred, including concrete foundations, some site work that'll be ongoing throughout the project. Structural steel, obviously, as we begin to wrap that up. We're also getting into pouring the concrete slabs. We've got another slab pour scheduled for next week, which is great. And then we'll get into the installation of the roof, a lot of the building exterior, the facade as well. interior framing, interior mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection work. And then we get into interior finishes and wrap up with site and landscape finishes. So we've made good progress to date so far. Obviously, there's quite a bit of work left to do, but we're on a good track. I think we all feel pretty comfortable about where we're at so far. Hopefully this works. So like I said, we do a monthly drone video. Got some intense music behind it, but sort of laying the context again, Michelle had provided the final renderings. You can kind of see how this comes to life now, showing that A building, academic wing, the 3 stories. You can see how the structural steel has been erected. We actually have the blankets, which you can see in orange, for the concrete slab pour, which are required for some of the colder conditions when we begin to pour these slabs. So hopefully next week we should be out of the colder conditions to have to avoid having to wrap those slabs. So we're actually from west looking east on that academic wing as we make our way around. As I mentioned, we've got a decent amount of site utilities, drainage structures in place, which obviously helps with site circulation, around the site. So, working to the north elevation, you'll start to see within the next few weeks, framing start to go up. One of our next big activities and tasks is to get this thing enclosed so we can start the interior work within the building. So that stockpile area you see down there is actually going to be the final location of the turf field and the playground areas. We're using it as lay down space at the moment because the turf field is kind of one of the last things we do on this project. See our close proximity to 128. Relatively tight site, a little tighter than what we're used to and what we'd like to have, obviously being the spoiled construction managers. So we're managing the best we can. We feel like, again, we've got a pretty good site set up as of now. And I think once we kind of get a lot of the site utility work done, it'll open up a lot more space to be able to store material and contractor vehicles and whatnot on site. You can see how we're kind of wrapping north, going back to east to the B building, what we call it, which houses most of the assembly spaces that Michelle mentioned earlier, including the gymnasium, the cafeteria, the media center, all spaces that we saw those nice renderings of. So we're probably at this point 60% done with steel, maybe a little bit higher. We've lost a few days because of weather. Having some snow in New England isn't great for us, but we were able to manage that pretty well. And again, to Brian's point, we feel pretty comfortable about staying on track with schedule. So for those of you that were able to attend the topping off ceremony, that's kind of a ceremonial thing for the iron workers to kind of get that last beam up, as a kind of a token of their completion of the steel erection. So hopefully this gives you some good context and oversight into how that building is starting to come to life and come to shape. You can see the entry points from Webster Street as well that we've been utilizing to the best of our ability, making sure that we're notifying neighbors and local residents of any kind of disruptive work and activities that are going on around the site. That's it. So I think this gets shared with the public as well, Ben, right?
Yeah.
So we do this monthly. Hopefully it'll be a good progress point for you guys to reference each month.
We're also doing the 5 to 10 minute snapshots
Yep.
for a timeline.
Yep.
That'll be available at the end of the job in between.
There's snowstorms in there and everything.
Hopefully we're done with that.
I don't know who would answer this, but is there a drainage system on this property?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I see water.
Yep.
We know it used to be water, so I'm just concerned.
Yeah, it's a pretty extensive system. We've got 2 detention systems, 2 infiltration systems, which basically takes a lot of the runoff from slopes and water on site. It kind of cleans it up and then lets it percolate into the ground. We also have a larger detention basin, which takes a lot of the storm water as well and kind of infiltrates it back into the earth.
Okay. And did we do anything with gray water on this project?
With gray water?
Yeah.
No.
So the water is being pretty much maintained on site. It's not draining out.
It's infiltrated.
Yeah.
Yep, as you were saying, there's 2 large infiltration basins on site, so all the water, storm water is diverted to those infiltration basins, and then any sheet, water is into a detention basin. That too also goes back into the site.
We have these structures, things like called water quality units, which basically takes a lot of that water. And there's some centrifugal, maybe you guys can talk to it a little bit more, but there's some kind of fancy device, I wish I came up with it, but a fancy device that kind of separates the mucky water from the nice water. The nice water will run off. These drainage structures will contain that mucky stuff to be removed at a later date, similar to what you see with catch basins and whatnot. So
That's pretty good for.
Yeah.
like being a civil engineer.
Yeah. The athletic turf, is that natural or artificial?
Artificial, just because of the high use that it's going to receive.
And that way we can use it year round.
Yeah.
Which is really, it just longer lasting, but really the much more use.
Any other questions? Just had one other comment, I think with some of the questioning that was happening before concerning the cost of the project. I wanted to make it clear that we have what's called a GMP, a guaranteed maximum price contract on this job. So for everything that was included in the project drawings and specifications, that price is fixed. So even if material prices go up, that price is fixed. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because then we've been dealing with those costs and we kind of handled that risk upfront through the value engineering that we did, through some of the negotiations with the subcontractors, choosing the lowest bids, and coming in within the budget.
Well, the material markets are so volatile right now that they could easily exceed whatever that GMP is that you have.
Right.
Yeah, we essentially told our subcontractors during bid that you need to account for inflation or escalation, because we're not going to really entertain, material markups at a later date. So to Brian's point, we have a really good kind of view of what this project budget's going to be.
And I want Brian to clarify that, because it's easy to listen to and know what's happening in the construction industry and feel that this is going to accelerate and increase in cost. And it will not be doing that because of the procedures, protocols, pricing, bids that the folks that have gone through and are now tied to. So that's when Brian talked about it being managed well. It's managed well throughout the project. So I just want to make sure people understand that there's not a risk of the TMP increase.
They work in weekends?
Not normally.
That'll be at the end.
Yeah, hopefully not, but
Yeah.
how it goes.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming in person. We appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having us.
Thank you.
It's nice to be in, see people.
You folks are free to
You don't
go.
want to
So
stay
hey,
in restaurant.
yourselves. You're welcome to stay, but you do not need to.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
I would just like to reiterate that in the course of value engineering, we never did anything that's affected the education.
Affected the education.
More on finishes, different materials, using different materials. There's some different exterior planting, things like that, but thank you, John. Thanks again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.
Good night, Al.
Okay. Superintendent's report?
Oh, it's all right. Sorry. This is a short presentation, really focusing. My report on this focusing, because we've had quite a bit of presentations and material already, is I will focus on just on the update on COVID, where we are in COVID. Okay. Oops. There we go. So just a quick COVID update. So as I said before, and well, and it's interesting. I think you folks know this, but now the Globe reports regularly about the wastewater across Massachusetts, and there was a big article. I can't remember. It might have been in New York Times. There was a national publication lauding Colorado for their wastewater. They're using BioBot as well. Our health department in Gloucester, the city of Gloucester, started doing this in summer of 2020, well ahead of everybody, ahead of large cities, or ahead of states. And you can see the data is right here, of course, going back to August 2020, but just as a real credit to where this community was in the beginning stages of the pandemic, that and now folks readily acknowledge that it's the most persistent and accurate measure of COVID in the community. So just want to really acknowledge that. And as we see here, as I've been showing every week, and especially now that rapid tests are much more common and happening much more, and PCR tests aren't being, and therefore, folks aren't reporting through the health department and the state system on PCR tests as much as they were, that it remains the biggest indicator of where we are, where we have been, and where we're going in terms of the virus concentration in the community. So as you can see, we had some uptick end of March into April. We showed that reflected in the cases in our schools and the community, and now things have leveled off again. They're more or less steady since from 2 weeks ago to this past week, which is a good sign. Whenever things start going up, I panic slightly and worry that it's going to keep on going up, say like we had in December, but that doesn't seem to be happening at this point. It's just a couple of weeks here, but that's positive. We see that reflected in the reporting we do have in terms of our cases. So in our last meeting, we had 31 active cases. Now we have 14. Okay. Spread across the schools. So, low numbers you see at Gloucester High. This is students and staff combined. This is reporting PCR tests and also self-reporting because of our rapid tests. Veterans, we were watching closely for a couple of weeks, as I reported to you last time, and that settled out, thankfully. And so here you see the up and down we've had. It's interesting, when we were talking about masks, I showed you data from a year ago where we had an uptick in March, and we had in 2021, and we had an uptick in March again. And then, which is, I don't know why, but so you see March 23rd, third week of March. That was just about maybe 1 week off from a year ago. We also had an increase in March, which wasn't connected to February vacation last year, wasn't connected to that this year. I'm hoping that we will continue to decrease from there, from where we are, or where we're at the end of March, right to the end of the year, like we happened last year. But it's hard to know that. But we'll keep it close up. This is our freezing testing going back about a month across all the schools. So you see on the top row the pool participants and how many positives were found that week, and then the at-home test distributed. You can see that those have remained very consistent in terms of participation in at-home tests. And you see the NA every other week in terms of the number of at-home tests distributed, because we distribute every other week boxes of 2 tests. So people are getting tests every week. They have tests available every week, but they get them distributed every other week. And you can see how the numbers are quite low. So this shows us that we're getting reports through the pool testing, reports through the at-home testing, and then reports outside of that. People still are testing privately or through their doctors or through local areas, and so we also getting reports of those as well. So that's really just that's all in terms of update on COVID in terms of my reports.
Okay.
It seems like people are dropping in the pool testing and increasing in the app.
Well, no, thank you for clarifying that. So you see this week, fewer folks participating in pool testing. MCAS was going on, and we don't interrupt MCAS for, to take the testing. But yeah, so that's actually been happening the last 2 weeks. And also could be absences as well. So, there has been some change there, but the 796 you see there is definitely MCAS.
So,
Okay.
so that's MCAS from all the schools? You know what I'm saying? Because,
It's all the elementary schools are taking MCAS
Right.
this week. So that's the impact across all schools, that it impacted the number of students who were taking.
right, so that's 27 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that leads to my question, which is, do we have the percentages of how many of our students are participating in testing?
You mean if, so like not double counting folks who are doing,
Right, so the number of, how many students in our district participate in pool testing and how many students in our district participate?
and you're looking for like, not double counting. essentially.
Right, like,
So I haven't asked them to pull that number.
oh,
I wasn't clear on that request, so, but we can I think we can find it out. We should be able to find that out.
okay.
Right now, they're two separate groups. Let me look into that.
Thank you.
How many?
So we have upward of 2,000 students, right?
2,800. And then 600 staff.
And this number is students and staff.
Yes,
Correct.
both numbers are student staff.
So you want to know students versus staff? Yes.
Well, total, but a student certainly. I mean, this is, a small percentage. It's under 50%. Or at least pool testing.
Yeah. People have made choices.
No, I'm not.
about how- yeah,
I just would like to know the percentages, because that's what we're basing our numbers on, right? It's how many positives are coming up in our testing in addition to whatever else comes up. So it's just how good a gauge is it of what's happening in our schools?
Right, remember, we've always, so right now we have 3 different versions of people, 3 different ways to report. Before it was essentially, just PCR tests. So that's true. I mean, but I just want to be clear that there are 3 ways. So we get, if folks take a PCR test outside of school, that's reported to us through the Department of Health. If they take rapid tests, whether they're in our program or not, they have to self-report, okay? And then the pool testing, obviously. So those 3 were. So you want to get how many individuals are participating in one or both?
So the question I had asked previously was, how many participate in the full testing system? How many
Discrete individuals.
discrete individuals, and then what percentage? It's a percentage question. What percentage participate in pool testing? Just pool testing.
Yeah, so the 800 is out of 30. Those are individuals, 7, 9, in this case.
Right, so that's an easier number to come up
Yeah,
with, but just the total that doesn't, that's discrete individuals is
Yeah.
harder.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, next order of business is subcommittee reports. We have one from a special building and finance subcommittee meeting on April 11th, 2022. Melissa?
Yep, so we met on Monday, and in attendance was Bill Melvin, Kathy Clancy, myself, Superintendent Lummis, Gary Frisch, and Greg Pagnini. I misspoke his name at the meeting. I was very embarrassed, and I apologize to him. So what we did was we reviewed policy KF and KFSR, which is the community use of school facilities, and the procedures that go along with it, including costs. So as you know, because I sent it to everyone, we developed a spreadsheet to show what the last 4 years of school use look like. and learned that it's probably 99% school, student, staff related rentals. And a very, very small portion of those rentals go to private organizations. So with all that information, we first looked at our policy and we are gonna suggest some changes. We're gonna meet again and put it in draft form before we make any recommendations. But one of the, some of the changes you'll see coming forward is we're adding a sentence right to the beginning of the policy, which is to enhance the objective to rent to local groups and recognize that our buildings are valuable assets. The language that we're looking at is similar to what is in the Beverly policy. However, through the discussions of the superintendent and the attorney, they'll come up with the language we exactly want to capture. We're suggesting adding a anti-discrimination language recognition to the policy by referencing our own policy, which is policy number AC. In addition, the City of Gloucester's Human Rights Commission is discussing doing a citywide anti-discrimination policy. So we're going to try to capture some language in our policy that would recognize city policies as well. Even though it hasn't been drafted and approved yet, it'll still reference any potential language that goes citywide. We are suggesting to add language to the current eligibility and priority language part of the policy, where we can specifically recognize community youth groups, those groups such as sports and drama and other activities that want to use our facilities. We want to make them a priority within the list that's already on the policy. So then we turned over to procedure, and Superintendent Lummis and Gary through administration, they drafted this great document and gave it to us, which was a list of talking points, more so regarding policy points that we can talk about and discuss and potentially change. So we are talking about considering adding the school committee to the approval process for those requests that are not directly linked to student, staff, and community. So that's small 1%. We're going to talk about maybe putting that on a consent agenda or something so that the committee as a whole will see that when those types of rentals happen. And that's customary in other school districts as well. So the topics that we are discussing that was listed on that document from the superintendent, we'll talk about the conversations that happen between the DPW and the schools during the approval process. Right now, the school approves it, and then the DPW figures out how to hire the custodians and things like that. We're going to make those communications happen simultaneously before the final approval is done. At least this is the conversations we're going to have. We talked about application fees, damage fees, the increase to rental fees, liability policy, cancellation language, renters' responsibilities, and areas of the schools that we may not feel comfortable renting. And right now we've identified potentially elementary classrooms, with the exception of art and music rooms, the specialty rooms. And also on our list, it says that we rented our offices, which really doesn't make much sense. So we're going to talk about potentially removing them from the list of community use, knowing that if someone needed to use a classroom, they could use O'Malley or the high school instead of the elementary school where the kids stay in the classrooms all day as opposed to rotate, so they're not as exposed and
intimate.
Intimate, exactly, that's the word. Thank you. So we're meeting again on May 23rd. We're giving time to the administration to work with Attorney Pagnini, and we'll come forward to the BNF subcommittee at that time, and hopefully we'll have some draft language to make recommendations to this committee for approval. But I guess as I'm looking, I'm curious to know if there's any areas of topic of conversation you would like us to have that maybe I didn't mention. Because I know we'll probably come forward with a policy, and if we can know ahead of time what concerns you may have at this time or may not, that's often helpful when you're reviewing policies. And if you don't, that's okay, you can email it and we can pick it up on the 23rd.
Most of my, I think it's been a lot of good work on this. So, yeah, I appreciate it.
Also pulled a lot of, gave us links to a lot of different districts. And it's just really good to
Tons
know
of
how
policies.
they
that-
phrase it, how they
Yeah.
manage it.
I think it's really comprehensive.
It's really updating.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we've discussed policy language, but we haven't just discussed procedures or cost on those since
Right.
we probably made the policy years ago.
Right.
Because the prices were so cheap. I mean, $10 for a classroom.
Right.
It's just unheard of. So that work's coming and hopefully get it done by the end of May and be done with it and off to a brighter future with community use in our building.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. We will move on to action, and there's only one item, which is the approval of the nurses tentative agreement effective September 1st, 2021 to August 31st, 2024. And I will turn it over to Samantha.
So as discussed in executive session, in our last meeting, we approved the nurses agreement, but we had to make a slight change and had to approve that in executive session. Now we'll have to approve it again in public session, and the change was agreed upon between both groups. And it's just to remove the amended language to Article 8, Section 1B. Are you going to do that?
It might be good, so that
Okay. So what we're agreeing to remove is upon initial employment in the Gloucester Public Schools, nurses will receive full credit for every 1 year of relevant experience in nursing and their school nurse work up to a maximum of step 5. So like I said, per discussion between both groups, that was removed. And so
So can I, sorry, to
Yeah.
interrupt, that means it just reverts back to the existing language that is already in the contract, that obviously been approved in all prior contracts, which essentially gives allows the superintendent the discretion based on prior experience.
Yes.
And the nurses decided that was, even though they proposed this change, they decided that in combination with their membership, that the existing language is better than.
Well, no, that wasn't the reason.
Well, they prefer that, I mean, they prefer the existing language over what was.
It was a step, it was the change in steps.
I think it's because we get to step 5 by the end of the contract anyway, because we removed steps. So it didn't seem as much of an issue.
Sure,
But in comparison, they would prefer, I think what Ben's saying is, they would prefer the current language
Right,
than
they're
what
gonna
they
get more.
proposed.
Well, no, I mean, I just want to say that, like, that the people are clear, like, that, I'm assuming, maybe I'm making an inference there, that they, in considering with the membership, that they prefer the existing language over what they had originally proposed. So, but I just want to make sure that folks that know that there's actually language addressing this exact situation already existing in the contract. This was a proposal to amend that language. So it's not, so the contract is not silent on this issue. Gives the, there's already language to allow for these situations. Sorry for confusing that.
No, it's fine. Maria, you might have to remind me of the exact motion. Can I just?
It was to approve the tentative agreements as presented, which will supersede the prior.
I just need to remember that word.
What did you
decide on?
just say? So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Excellent.
Yes, excellent work with that team. We will do a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy.
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
and Ms. Prince.
Yes. Passes unanimously, 6-0. Mayor Verga left us after the public hearing of the budget. Okay, so is there any other new business that anybody needs to? No, okay, so that concludes the business of the school committee this evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Maria, please.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
Chairperson Clancy.
Yes.
Mr. Melvin,
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Minio,
Yes.
and Ms. Prince.
Yes.
Night. Okay. Good night, everyone.